Um, okay, so we're on to the Vagrant. Um, this is the class I was talking to you about earlier, Logan, the one in which there are no basics.
Hmm. Oh, yeah.
It is a massive. I don't want to kill any more kids. It was bad. This is bad. Uh, the ordering of abilities is just off. But
Never did like the Vagrant.
yeah, but the abilities should be somewhat interesting. Like I kind of like the concept of the first ability, at least the very first part of it. It was an interesting way of having it so that if you were playing and one of your characters got a really good item, you could always use that item, even if you couldn't use it technically. Plus, it allowed the Vagrant to be like an archer and stuff like that. You normally wouldn't be able to. Pester Stitch, its return. This is an example of something that doesn't work um, for the player. Uh, it what we were trying to do, what the main mechanic of this class seemed to be, at least from right here, is once you get to first in the turn order, you get a benefit, and you're constantly just racing through the turn order to get to the top again. And that's kind of an interesting interaction. It's something that we could play with again later. Maybe it's the most interesting way to play with priority. Um, but I don't think that the rest of the kids supported it enough. So I don't think it was, and it shouldn't be a rank two either. That's kind of a given. I think we're gonna have out of order abilities. Um, Bowery Lurker is not necessary on the kit itself. Stealing 4 mana from the enemy doesn't really do anything because even though you're casting a 7 mana ability every turn, um, you can do that as a melee for like 4 turns in a row and be okay. You should be getting something else that you can use here rather than another passive. Just a Merchant is actually fairly reminiscent of one of the abilities that we just made for the Caporetto.
It is.
I like the name of just a merchant. Don't hit me, I'm just a merchant. I'm not gonna hurt you.
Yeah, it doesn't really fit within our current naming conventions, but I think that the goblins have a little bit more levity in terms of how we can craft the names.
I'd rather have my skill names be silly if I was a goblin,
If you're a
because
goblin.
goblins are silly.
Yeah, just a merchant.
Goblins are the best.
Um, Sleight craft, whenever you damage. Oh, that's okay. This is like really mathy and weird. I think there are other ways of doing an effect like this and making it more interesting. Being able to like, and there's not even, you wouldn't even want to use the actives that you have at this point multiple times in a turn.
Yeah.
Um,
I do have. I just was reminded of this. You want to avoid. You've been trying to avoid mathy stuff this whole time,
yes.
and you like Final Fantasy Tactics a lot, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the mathematician?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that why you don't want to do mathy stuff predominantly? Because
There's a mathematician class in that game.
yeah, what he does is you select a spell and man, I don't even know how to use it. He
Select
does math and
sparks.
then the spell happens.
The issue with any class like that is that okay, so let's say, do you read a lot of books, Logan?
Moderately,
Moderately. Do you read like one book every month, roughly?
one book every 2 months, roughly.
Okay, that's fine. That's I think how most people probably read books now, unless you're like an English major or something.
Yeah.
Um, when you're reading a book and the author is deliberately making it uh, generally people read books that they want to enjoy now. They're not reading them to dissect the symbolism, um, unless that's something that they really enjoy reading books for. And those sorts of people read lots of books. Uh, Analogically, in games like this, people are coming to enjoy themselves. They're coming to ingest an experience and feel satisfied afterward. And when you make it difficult for them to ingest that experience on any level, like if you take them out of the game by involving like the structure of the game, when you start taking down the walls and referencing things, even though it can be interesting mechanically, generally it results in something that is less than interesting for the player. It breaks your immersion. And I'm not saying that it's not possible to do it. That's as interesting and like self-referential as a really good novel that requires you to know or calculate multiple things at once. I think that probably the Ridsmith is the closest to that we have.
Yes.
But you do that on a class for a reason. You do not create abilities like that on every class, or even half of your classes. You stay very wary of them. I think that creating any sort of math for a player when they're trying to understand their abilities, when they're trying to use them, should be reserved only for the types of players who play a Ridsmith, or who would immediately think to themselves, that's the one I want to I think that perhaps for the sake of argument, mathematician is that way. Technically, if you're playing, no one really thinks, "Oh, that's a mathematician. I want to play that," except for mathematicians.
Yeah.
But I think that that's a bit too selective. And aren't they called calculators?
I think in the remake they're mathematicians.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the PSP remake they are mathematicians.
Okay. Yeah, and those, as little as I remember them, that's how they struck me. Was like, why would I want to play this? That's like super and needlessly complicated when I can play all these other cool classes that are much more like straight to the point.
Exactly. Despite the point of them being way too good once you know how to use them.
Yes.
But I mean, that's the exact reason they were made.
Right. They were designed for a subset of the audience.
Exactly. Which is one, why they're hard to get, and two, why they're hard to learn.
Right. There's nothing wrong with designing in that way, but I would say that in general we're trying to make things less. We're trying to lower the skill floor to the point people can play any class that they want to from the very beginning. But as you play the class, interactions that are there might not be immediately obvious to you unless you're paying attention. And something like the Ridsmith you can play at a low level and still have fun with. But if you're playing at a really high level, you're gonna have a lot of fun with it, I think. That's what I hope for the class, rather than a reflection of any sort of honest appraisal.
I just wanted to know where you were coming from on that.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry if that was lengthy.
No, yeah, I can understand not wanting mathy stuff because math.
Yeah.
Like having a clear reason why you don't want it is just good to know.
Yeah, I think so. It shouldn't just be like, no, I don't like mathy stuff. There should be an explanation. I used to do, or I have done a lot of work with another designer, and generally like pretty good reasons for things, but sometimes he'll revert to saying like, I just don't want it to be that way. That's the least helpful thing for someone who wants to help you with designing a game or anything really. Like, if they don't provide you for a reason and they don't communicate what that reason is, then there's no way for you to work around their reasoning. So perhaps I over provide reasoning.
I think good.
Okay, cool. For anyone who's watching, that's what you come to this stream for. It's me over providing my reasoning to questions posed to me. And also because JJ and Logan are so cute.
Oh, right? You can see our faces and everything.
Yeah.
You can just tell by their voices that they're cute.
Right. We should start a boy band. Let's do it.
No, I actually look like the Furby on Skype.
He does. Here, let me show you guys. There you go.
That's me.
Unblinking. Okay, so let's get through all these goblins just to get them out of the way.
Yes. I think there's one more after Vagrant.
Yep. So Fetid Garb let you transfer ailments and debuffs to enemies, but this class on its own doesn't have any ailments or debuffs. So you can see where we were like really getting focused. Usually by this point in time, we'd sort of either run out of ideas or we were getting burnt out. So we would say like, how do we make this class have a better synergy with the Blight Martyr? Okay, this would be cool if you could transfer ailments or debuffs. We never did that on that class. Let's put it on this one. What we should have been saying was, that's a cool ability. Let's see if we can find a place for it in the other kit. The one where it actually would make sense. Mugging is an interesting one because it lets you do interesting things with being able to attack at melee range if you're being because there's no survivability on the class. You need a way to be able to get to the front row and attack people if you're not using a spear, and even if you are using a spear, you need a way to get to the front row and attack people. And perhaps it's a little bit too risky because you have no way of getting back, but I think it is an interesting ability, only because of how much yield it gives you for putting yourself at risk. Hustle is interesting because it is so clunky, and it's the second class to have invisibility as like a sub-theme of the goblins. It makes invisibility a sub-theme of the goblins, but it does it at such a late stage that's so disconnected from the rest of the kit. Like, I think the main problem with the Vagrant is that there's no connectiveness within the kit. The only thing that connects it is that there are no basics, and that's not really a connecting factor at all. In fact, because we removed the design space of basics, we really limited ourselves in what we could do. It basically all had to revolve around your attacks being interesting, and you weren't thinking, I think, enough about what made attacking interesting. We were thinking more about, oh, this is a cool thing that attacking could do, rather than really processing why attacks are interesting. That's a question that should probably be asked at some point. Like an essay or something. Someone should say, why is attacking interesting in RPGs? And go on to like a 25-page. I can't say I'd read it, but I'd be happy that it was in existence.
Pretty sure you'd be the person writing it.
Maybe someday. That'd be kind of cool. Like you come in with your dissertation, you're like, yeah, I did this on why attacking is fun.
On what? Excuse me, huh?
Yeah.
No, like robbing people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just taking all their money and punching them in the head.
Just attacking them.
Yeah, you guys know the game Whack-A-Mole? like you're the guy at Chuck E. Cheese who like comes over next to the machine. You're like, hey kid, like, you want to know something about Whack-A-Mole? And they explain like the game theory behind Whack-A-Mole, and the kid's just hammering the moles, like trying to get you to shut up.
Just hitting it harder.
Yeah.
That's you. That's who you are.
That's who I am, I guess. Also, you should never start a statement with "Hey kid." You're either in the 50s or you're a really shady individual.
Hey, if I wanted to sell some troll, and I wanted to get that attention in their kids.
Hey kid.
Hey kid.
Drugs.
Want some drugs. Drugs are bad, kids.
Yeah, hoax is just weird because it doesn't fit anywhere else in the kit. It's like allowing you to tank for your allies, but it also makes it so that the ability is much harder to cast because your sleight craft passive from earlier, or no, sorry, your passive that's allowing you to steal mana from people is supposed to fund all of these abilities that only cost 7 mana. So we had to find a way to make an ability that cost more. So we did it in a really artificial way. And then Ragwallow Denizen is a passive upgrade that allows you to steal more mana to pay for the ability that comes before it that doesn't need to be there.
Perfect.
Yeah. I do think that stealing mana is an interesting mechanic and maybe would be something that this class could be based around. But it's not very much fun for the enemy. It's actually really not. And I think actually there's a class in the Iotls called the Brinemonger. He's this pirate, and his core mechanic, what I was hoping his core mechanic would be, is that he mana burns people. Like he just gets rid of the mana. He doesn't steal it or anything. It's gone.
Just damages mana.
Yeah, he just damages mana with his attacks. What I think would be better is if you damaged a threshold of their mana, basically. And if they accessed that threshold, they took a ton of damage. So
that's pretty interesting.
You're just attacking and attacking and attacking. For the first few times, like maybe over 2 turns you get the threshold to 20, and now even at like max level or something, you not spending 20 mana is kind of a big deal. And the threshold just keeps on gaining until it's burned, and then they take damage equal to however much was on the threshold. That's cool. Okay. All right. So that's an example of thinking through an ability. For anyone who is watching.
Thinking sometimes happens here.
Yeah. So occasionally we actually design instead of trashing our old design. On the Brinemonger, damages, creates a mana threshold based on damage dealt. And there's actually good counterplay to this too, because you could spend a lot of turns building it up, but if they break it before there's a lot of it there, then they don't take all that much damage. The issue is that they have to spend so much mana to break it that they're in a bad position afterward. So they're kind of valuing damage over spending their mana inefficiently. I like that tension. Threshold based on damage dealt. The threshold if breached to consume deals damage to target equal to its. Alright, so